Dear Class 9 students, welcome to today's English class. Today we have a poem from our textbook Beehive, a legend of Northland, written by Phoebe Cary. Before going to the poem, we will just see who was Phoebe Cary. Phoebe Cary was born in 1824 and died in 1871. She was an American poetess and the younger sister of poetess Alice Cary. The sisters co-published poems in 1849 and then each went on to publish volumes of their own. After their death in 1871, joint anthologies of sisters unpublished poems were also compiled. So she comes from a family where two sisters were poets. A legend of the Northland is a ballad. A ballad is a poem narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballad is such kind of poem which tells a story in short stanzas. And the poem, all the stanzas comprise 4 lines. In total, there are 16 stanzas in this poem, and these stanzas will tell us a story. Ballads are a part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. Folk culture is a story of any area and is known as ballad. Folk culture comprises of traditional stories which are passed on from one generation to next generation. This particular story is of the Northland area, the area which is near the North Pole. This exact place is not specified, but Northland means the area in the northernmost part of the earth, that is near the North Pole. Legend means a historical story, one which is very old and has been passed on from generation to generation. Before going to the explanation of this poem, let's read this poem from the beginning to end, because it is a ballad and it's a folk story. We are going to follow the reading of this poem from the beginning to end. Afterwards, we will come and see the explanation of poem stanza wise.
Now let us listen to a poem, A Legend of the Northland, written by Phoebe Cary. Pages 65 to 67. Introduction. This poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. A legend of the Northland. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny, furry clothes. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe 'tis true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once When the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, he came to the door of a cottage in travelling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Therefore, she needed another, and still a smaller one, but it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. For she said, "My cakes that seem too small, when I eat of them myself, are yet too large to give away." So she put them on the shelf. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard dry wood." Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal in the flame. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. In the box. A ballad is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballads are a part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. A legend of the Northland is a ballad. Glossary. Legend means old traditional story. Saint Peter is an apostle of Christ. Provoke means make angry. Thinking about the poem. First part. 1. Which country or countries do you think the Northland refers to? 2. What did Saint Peter ask the old lady for? What was the lady's reaction? 3. How did he punish her? 4. How does the woodpecker get her food? 5. Do you think that the old lady would have been so ungenerous if she had known who Saint Peter really was? What would she have done then? 6. Is this a true story? Which part of the poem do you feel is the most important? 7. What is a legend? Why is this poem called a legend? 8. Write the story of A Legend of the Northland in about 10 sentences. Second part. 1. Let's look at the words at the end of the second and fourth lines, viz. Snows and clothes, true and you, below and no. We find that snows rhymes with clothes, true rhymes with you, and below rhymes with no. Find more such rhyming words. 2. Go to the local library or talk to older persons in your locality and find legends in your own language. Tell the class these legends.
Dear students, I hope you carefully followed the reading of this poem. Now we will move to the poem. Stanza 1. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. In the region around the North Pole, that is Northland, the duration of the day is very less because its position is such that the sun's rays reach for a very less time. When this area is experiencing winter season, the duration of the night is very long and the daytime hours are very less. In line 4, they refers to the people who live in this region. The poet says that the duration of the night time is so long that the people cannot sleep them through. Too much time. If they go to bed, take a few hours of sleep and then they wake up, it is still night time. He wants to emphasize on the fact that the duration of the night is very long. That's what we see in this very first stanza. Now we shall go to second stanza. Stanza 2. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. Sledges means a vehicle or runners for conveying loads or passengers over snow or ice, often pulled by draught animals. You might have reindeers pulling sledges. In Christmas season, you might have seen Santa Claus is coming on sledges pulled by reindeers. To harness means to tie the reindeers with a rope to a sledge so that it can be used for transportation. No wheels on the sledges because it moves on ice. Wheels won't be able to move on ice, so it has a sled. Swift, something which runs very fast. The Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. Everywhere ice, snow. It is a snowy area. The reindeer is an animal which is found in this polar region. People tie the reindeers to sledges and then the reindeers pull the sledges. He adds that the children look like young ones of bear because they wear furry, funny looking clothes made up of fur, which is like the furry skin of a bear. Now we shall move to the third stanza of the poem. Stanza 3 is like this. They tell them A curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Curious means strange. In the line 1, they refers to the parents or elders, and them refers to the children of the younger generation. They tell them a curious story. Someone tell a story, a curious story to somebody else, the elder one to the younger ones. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the younger generation. The poet says that he doesn't think that the story is true, but if he tells the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. There is a moral in this story. The story gives an important message. Now we shall see stanza 4. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, Saint Peter. Who is Saint Peter? An apostle of Christ, a disciple or follower of Jesus Christ, preaching to give a religious talk. Yes, the story is about whom? About Saint Peter. Who was Saint Peter? Saint Peter was a disciple of Jesus Christ. What was he doing? He was preaching. He was preaching the good news about Jesus Christ. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around giving religious lectures to the people, just like all saints do, then an incident happened. When Saint Peter was preaching the gospel or preaching the good news, something happened. That's what we are going to see. It's only a story. Now we have stanza 5. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Hearth means fireplace where you do cooking. When Saint Peter was moving around the world, giving religious lectures to the people, preaching, he reached the door of a cottage where a small woman was making cakes. The lady was making cakes. You all love cake, I hope. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace. The baking is done on fireplace. Now we shall see stanza 6 of the poem. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Faint, to be weak or famished. Being faint with fasting, there was nothing for Saint Peter to eat in that day. The day has come to an end. So he was so weak, tired of hunger and fasting. Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day. That entire day he hadn't eaten anything. He was very hungry and was feeling weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes, and he asked for one cake out of many cakes that she had baked. Now we shall see stanza 7 of this poem. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. What kind of lady this is? A person came and asked for a cake because he was starving like anything. And this lady, what did she do? The woman was very selfish. She was very selfish. She did not give a cake from her store. She had already made a lot of cakes. She was not ready to give any cakes which she had already made. Instead, she started making a very small cake for the Saint Peter because it has to be given simply. No, she did not want to share her things. That's why she is selfish. But when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that this cake was too big to be given away to someone. The cakes already she had baked or made were big, so she made a small one, and she felt that even that one is too big to be given away. So she is going to make again a small one. Stanza 8. Therefore she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Kneaded means to make dough from flour. Is pushing and squeezing. The little miser woman, that lady, selfish lady, thought that the cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at that cake, she again felt what? That it was also as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready, not okay to give this smaller cake, according to her a bigger cake, to Saint Peter. Now stanza 9. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer. But she couldn't part with that. Scrap means a smaller one. The third time, she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. The poet says that she rolled and rolled to lay emphasis on the fact that she rolled the dough and made it very thin like a wafer and baked it. But she was so greedy that she couldn't give that thin piece of bread to the saint. Wafer means paper like thin, very thin bread. Now we shall see in stanza 10. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat for them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. The woman reasoned that she felt when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small. But if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen, and she did not give any cake to the Saint Peter. Such a selfish lady, no? When she wants to eat the cake, they are too small. When it has to be given away to somebody else, it felt to be too big. So she did not give anything. She kept all the cakes, whether small one or big one, everything in the shelf and closed. So that means no cakes were given to Saint Peter. Stanza 11 of the poem. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint. And surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Provoke caused to get angry. Though the Saint Peter was a good man, though he was a saint, even he grew angry, because for he was hungry and faint. And poet says, surely that kind of woman, such a woman, was enough to provoke even a saint. Saint Peter became angry. He was very hungry. He was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of greedy woman angered the saint. Now we shall see stanza 12 of the poem. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm, dwell to live. Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. No human being can go this much selfish. He added that God had given her food, shelter, fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish like anything for all the resources she had. She did not want to share them with anybody. Because of her selfishness, the Saint Peter is going to curse her. Stanza 13. Now you shall build as the birds do, as shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in hard dry wood. Scanty means very little. Boring, make a hole in something with a tool or by digging. Saint Peter cursed the stingy, miser, selfish woman that hence she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. She was such a selfish lady. Though she got food, shelter, warmth, everything, she was not ready to share with anybody. So Saint Peter thought she doesn't deserve to remain in human form, and she shall become a bird. And just like birds build their houses by boring in the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day, similarly, exactly the birds have to work very hard from day early morning to the entire day time, then only they will get a little food. Same way she is also going to happen. She's also have to work hard the entire day. She would also work hard in the dry wood and all day get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. She had a home, and here by the curse of Saint Peter she is going to have a very little room to live, place to live, and she is going to be going to be a bird who has to bore boring and boring and boring from morning to evening to get a little food. Stanza 14 of the poem. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, and for she was changed into a bird. This lady is changed into a bird. What kind of bird? She was changed into a woodpecker. She went through the chimney of the house. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself. She was not able to defend herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird. Saint Peter cursed and converted that woman into a bird, converted that woman into a woodpecker. Stanza 15. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of the clothes were burned, black as coal in the flame. Scarlet, brilliant red color. You remember the color and shape of woodpecker, I hope. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red colored cap on her head. This cap was then there on the bird's head also, but the woman's remaining clothes had burned and turned black in color, just like coal. The rest of the body black in color. Now stanza 16. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Country belong to countryside, that is rural areas. A village boy. People who live in the countryside, village side, even the small children, schoolboy who go to school, seen this kind of bird in the woods, woodpeckers in the forest, wood area. They see that she stays there all day and keeps on digging in the wood with their hair beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this kind of bird, then his elders tell him this story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy, and so she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird. They get a teaching that they should not be greedy. Whenever old people, elders see a woodpecker, they would say this story to the young ones. For what? To make them to feel that they shouldn't become selfish, they shouldn't become greedy. Now we shall see certain literary devices which were used in our poem. Rhyme scheme of the poem is A, B, C, B. there is alliteration is used. Alliteration means is the repetition of consonant sound in two or more close words. In stanza 1, we shall see like this: da, they, them, through, da. The sound is repeating there. Then in stanza 2, they, da. There also the sound is repeating. Then in the same stanza itself we have look, like. L sound is repeating. Then funny, furry. F sound is repeating. Now we shall see same kind of alliteration in stanza 3 of the poem. They, them, the sound is repeating. Yet, you. Yeah. Y sound is repeating. Learn, lesson. Again L sound is repeating. Tell, tail, to. Ta sound is repeating. T. Then stanza 5, women. Was, w, w sound is repeating. Them, the, herb, the sound is repeating. And then stanza 6, faint, fasting, f sound is repeating. Stanza 8, you have still and smaller, s sound is repeating. In stanza 9, you have took, tiny, t sound is repeating. In stanza 10, you have seem, small, s sound is repeating. In stanza 13 of the poem, build, words, b sound is repeating. Buy, boring, boring. There also this b sound is repeated. Then repetition. Any word, that's another kind of literary device used in this poem, that is repetition. Any word or sentence is repeated to lay emphasis on it. In stanza 1, away word is repeated. In stanza 9, rolled word is repeated. And stanza 13 and 16, we have boring and boring word is repeated. Now we have simile, comparison using as or like. Stanza 2, we have the children look like bears' cubs. Children compared to bears' cubs. In stanza 9, we have baked thin as a wafer. Cake is compared to a wafer, tiny. So, thin. Stanza 15, clothes were burned black as a coal. The color of the burned cloth is compared to that of coal. So the poem is a legend about this poem is about an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed and selfishness. The story goes on like this. One day, Saint Peter was preaching good news around the world and reached the door of a cottage where this woman lived. She was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Saint Peter was fainting with hunger, so tired. He asked the lady to give him a piece of cake. The cake that she was baking then appeared to be too big. For her, it appeared to be too big. So she did not give him that. And instead, she baked another smaller one. That also appeared to be big. So she did not give him that too. The second time she baked yet another smaller cake, but found it too big to give away. The third attempt, she took an extremely little scrap of duff and rolled it flat. She had it as thin as a wafer, but was unable to part with that also. This angered Saint Peter a lot. He said that she was not fit to live in human form and enjoy food and warmth. He cursed her and transformed her into a woodpecker bird who had to bore in hard, dry wood to get its scanty food. She can be seen in the trees all day boring and boring for food. Now we have few questions answers in this poem. We shall see them. Which country or countries do you think that Northland refers to? The Northland refers to the region around the North Pole, which is extremely cold. It could be any country like Russia, Canada, Greenland, Norway, etc. What did Saint Peter ask the old lady for? What was the lady's reaction? Saint Peter asked the lady to give him a cake as he was hungry. The lady did not give him a cake out of the ones that she had baked. Instead, she baked a smaller one for him. How did he punish her? He punished the selfish lady by turning her into a woodpecker bird that had to bore into the dry wood all day to get some food and shelter. How does the woodpecker get her food? The woodpecker gets food by boring holes in the wood. Do you think that the old lady would have been so ungenerous if she had known who Saint Peter really was? What would she have done then? If the old lady knew who Saint Peter was, then she would not have been ungenerous. On the other hand, she would have served him well for the fulfillment of her greedy desires. Is this a true story? Which part of the poem do you feel is the most important? It's not a true story. The point of the story where the woman is turned into a woodpecker bird is the most important. This is so because the punishment teaches everyone the lesson to be generous, to be ready to give away. What is a legend? Why is this poem called a legend? A legend is a popular story from the past which is believed to be true but cannot be verified. It contains a moral which is narrated to the children to teach them moral values. Write the story of a legend of Northland in about 10 sentences. One day, Saint Peter was preaching around the world and reached the door of a cottage where this woman lived. She was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Saint Peter was fainting with hunger. She asked the lady to give him a piece of cake. The cake that she was baking then appeared to be too big, so she did not give him that, and instead she baked another smaller one. That also appeared to be big, so she did not give him that also. The second time, she baked yet another smaller cake, but found it too big to give away. The third attempt, she took an extremely little scrap of duff and rolled it flat. She had it as thin as a wafer, but was unable to part with that also. This angered Saint Peter a lot. He said that she was not fit to live in human form and enjoy food and warmth. He cursed her and transformed her into a woodpecker who had to bore in hard, dry wood to get its scanty food. She can be seen in the trees all day boring for food. Let's look at the words at the end of second and fourth lines. With snows and claws, true and you, below and no. We find that snows rhymes with cloths, true rhymes with the you, and below rhymes with the no. Let's find out more rhyming words like that. Few, through, earth, hearth, done, one, lay, away, flat, that, myself, shelf, faint, saint, form, woe, food, wood, word, bird, same, flame. The last activity along with this poem is Go to the local library or talk to older persons in your locality and find legends in your own language. Tell the class these legends. Um, in this pandemic situation, we are not even coming to school or anything like that. It's not possible to even go to school library or nearby libraries, anything like that. But there are possibility you can read books, or you can chances to know about the legends and folk stories around our localities, which always having bearing a moral values in it. Even our Onam celebration is around the legend, the legendary King Mahabali. So there are stories of that sort. That's what we are intending. All these morals of past have got legends, have got a moral value, a story in it, a message in it to be given away to us. So, dear students, today's English class has come to an end, but there are certain things you have to do. You all have to write the questions answers that I do send you in your English notebook. After completing writing notes in your notebook, you have to take photograph of your notebook and please send to me. And another task you have to do is writing your copybooks to improve your handwriting. Photographs of that copybook also should be sent to me. I have taught you a poem. I know that it's a bit lengthy one. Still, you have to read this poem. And please record the audio of your reading and please send to me. To sending all your assignments, notebooks, and this audio, you can make use of. You can upload that in Google Classroom, or you can make use of Parentai, or even via WhatsApp also you can send to me. Always do make sure that you are doing your activities, you are completing your notes, and make sure that you do send it to me. Along with that, from your workbook, I will be giving you few worksheets as assignment that also should be completed. You read the poem several times and prepare very well for the main test that will come the next day. Till we meet in the next English class, dear students, take care. Thank you.